Pam. Forgot to introduce Pam with her bio. Okay, Pam has been with Arizona Project WET in the Maricopa Extension Office for a couple decades. Plus, she's supposedly recently retired, but she hasn't retired because they haven't found somebody quite to replace her yet. She still works with Project WET. One of the things you need to know is Project WET is one of our approved partners. And if you want to volunteer at any of the water festivals, they're held all around the state coming up in the springtime. Your help is needed. No advanced training is necessary, just an interest in working with kids. You'll get on-the-spot training. They're a whole lot of fun. Kids get to experience water. 5th grade, is it, Pam? Fourth grade. Okay. So if you like 4th grade kids who are just little sponges for learning, this is really a good time to get involved. And I've known Pam. She also is the chair of the education committee, testing and education committee for Arizona Envirothon, which is in its 24th, 25th, 26th year now in Arizona, part of the national, used to be Canada Envirothon, NCF, National Conservation Foundation Envirothon. So she comes with lots of credentials and she knows more about water than most of us combined here. So take it away, Pam.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see my slide presentation. Okay, everybody seeing that first slide with the title on it?
Well, we see, there we are. Yep.
Got it. Okay, so water in Arizona is quite unique, and water in the West is quite unique compared to water laws in the East. And so my family's been here in Arizona since 1880, and I am not as familiar with water laws in the East as I am with water laws in the West. But I thought it might be a good start to the presentation just to talk about, just to kind of lay a basic foundation for you guys. So you may, if I am oversimplifying things, I apologize, but if you have questions because I've talked on a subject that you were unfamiliar with, be sure just to write your question in the chat real quick to Dave. And if it's something that needs clarification right away, Dave, go ahead and jump in and break and go ahead and interrupt me. But we'll hopefully I'll take some questions kind of quarter stops throughout the presentation. So I'm going to start really basic. And what you're seeing here is a map of when parts of the United States became part of our country. So the tan color is the original 13 colonies, our first 13 states. And then we annexed actually purchased from France, the whole midsection of the United States of Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Then in 1818, we bought part of the upper part of our country from England and gave them as kind of a trade. We ceded part to Great Britain so that line across the top of our country would be flat. If you look down in Florida, we bought Florida from the Spanish with the Spanish secession in 1819, and then we also, which included Florida, parts of Louisiana that we didn't get in the Louisiana Purchase. And then look, if you look at Colorado, that little tiny piece of pink was owned by Spain, and we got that in that session. Then Texas we annexed Texas, which was actually formed of the Republic of Texas. And that was in 1845. Then in 1846, a year later, we had another treaty with Great Britain and got the Oregon Territory. Arizona became this whole region, California, Nevada, Arizona, became part of the United States through the Mexican secession in 1848, so a couple years after Oregon. And then the Gadsden Purchase was made in 1853, which brought in that lower section of Arizona. Alaska came in, Hawaii was annexed in 1898, Alaska came in 1867, and then Puerto Rico and some of those other territories came in 1917. So, and as most of you know, we were the 48th state to become a state in the United States. That our birthday is coming up here on February the 14th, 1912. I'm moving my, apologize. So how did they get people to move over from back east and the Midwest over to the West? They lured people with the Homestead Act. If people would move here, they would actually give people 160 acres of federal land who agreed to farm it. And we actually distributed millions of acres. That was still in effect in the 1960s because the Homestead Act is how we got people to move to Alaska. And they were allowed to homestead plots of land in Alaska under the Homestead Act. It was over 100 years old. So my family moved out here in 1880 to homestead. They settled in the Middle Verde area. I had a great grandfather born in Maricopa County, and then a great grandmother born in Middle Verde, which right along the Verde River. Hardy stock. Pictures of my family look very similar to those people in this picture that you're seeing now. I can't imagine coming over here from the Midwest or back east in a covered wagon and crossing all the mountains and the rivers and all the obstacles that they had to face to get here. One of the things too that they, going backwards, one of the things that they did was whoever got here first, and again, it was part of that lure of getting people to move here, whoever got here first, I don't know why, let me figure out what's going on here. So in the East, they follow what's called the riparian doctrine. So it's whoever who has land frontage on the body of the water is able to use it any way they want to, and anybody can move in and utilize that water too. They have a lot more water available to them back there than we do here. So what they said with the West was that whoever got here first had first rights to that water. And that's called the prior appropriation doctrine. And it gives the right to the water to whoever puts their straw in the water for beneficial use. So farming, their sustenance. It was actually started in Colorado. A gentleman in Colorado on the Colorado River had took this actually to court. And they set the water law for the West based on that gentleman's lawsuit. So it still stands today. All the states west of the Mississippi, they follow the prior appropriation doctrine, which means that, let's say you are living on a river and somebody moves in upstream from you. They can take water as long as they leave enough that you have historically taken from that river. If they take more, then they can sue you and make you not take as much. So it's really odd for it's not what's in the best interest of the group, it's whoever got there first. And that law still stands. So when my family moved here in the 1880s, my great-grandfather born here in Maricopa County, the population in Maricopa County was 5,689 people. Most of those farmers that moved here along the Salt River Valley so that they could farm and grow crops. By 1940, the population in Maricopa County jumped to 186,193. The Second World War ended in 1945, ran from 1939 to 1945. We had several of the military personnel stationed in Arizona. Most of them were for back east in the Middle West where it snows. They loved the weather here. They loved Arizona. And we see a huge upward swing after World War II. of population growth in Arizona. We are in Maricopa County. Our population right now is 4,601,603 people. It's a lot of people. We are the fifth largest airport in the United States, busiest airport in the United States, and we just continue to grow. I am always amazed by this chart. So if this chart just runs from 57 to 2019. Our population in millions now this is Arizona, was about 1.2 million in 1957. Our population grew and we are now at about 7.4 million as in 2019. I think we've surpassed that now in the whole state. Now remember, the whole state of Arizona is like 7.6 million, but 4.6 live just in Maricopa County. So we have more than half of the population living in this county. But look what happened to the water. So in 1957, we're pulling about 170 billion acre feet of water out of all of our water sources. It peaked in 1980. And then it started dropping back down again. And we're now using about the same total amount of water to supply drinking water to, what would that be? 6 times more people than we had here in 1957. And we're using, we peaked our use in 1980, but we're using the same amount of water totally that we used in 1957 and in 2019. That is because we have done a really good job of educating the populace. They're putting, you know, they're a lot of them are doing xeriscape landscaping. We're getting more efficient water devices that are being built in our homes and we can buy at the hardware store. And we've just done a really good job of using less water per person than we have in years past. So this is just kind of give you an idea of population density. So in New York City, the population is almost 9 million people. Their area is only 300 square miles, but their population per square mile, so every square mile, averages 29,938 people. That's a lot of human beings. Phoenix population, we're 5th in size for the nation. Our population in 2023 was 1,656,892. Our area is 517 square miles, but we only have 3,201 on average people per square mile in the Phoenix metropolitan area. If you look at Scottsdale, it's 95th in size, population 248,555, 184 square miles, and the population per square mile is 1,351 people. So even less dense in Scottsdale. But still, we live in a desert. We don't have the water that New York has available to support that kind of population density. So in Arizona, we say we've got 4 water sources. Those water sources are groundwater, the Colorado River water, which is a form of surface water, right? Our in-state surface water, and our effluent or reclaimed water. Of those 4 water sources, 36%, this is statewide, 36% of the water used in Arizona comes from the Colorado River, 18% from in-state rivers, 41% from groundwater, and 5% from reclaimed water. And that water usage by sector, 72% of that water is used by agriculture still across the state of Arizona. 22% is municipal and 6% is industrial. So again, here's Scottsdale's. We're going to look at Scottsdale's water sources. Scottsdale's population is currently around 250,000. Their water sources, though, 66% of the water that they send out to the people who live in Scottsdale is from the Colorado River through the Arizona Project, Central Arizona Project Canal. 24% is from the Salt and the Verde rivers, and 7% is reclaimed, and then 3% is from groundwater. And I think what's interesting about this is what they have on their website, right? But they're actually taking this water from the Colorado River, they're blending it with their reclaimed water, and they're actually injecting it into the ground and then pulling it out with wells. So they say they use 3% groundwater, but actually most of this is put down in the ground and then pulled back out. But because that is their main source, their original source, they're saying that they use that. So that's not directly put into their potable water supply. It's put into their groundwater supply. So I live in Goodyear in the West Valley, and our current population is 119,000. And does anybody, if you could type it into the chat, anybody know what GPC stands for? GPCD? I don't see an answer yet. So that's gallons per capita per day. So that's how much one person uses in a 24-hour period. It's just an average, right? So they take their water, the water that they have going out, they divide it by the population, and then they give you that average number. So if you look at Scottsdale, I'm gonna go back to Scottsdale really quickly. I forgot to point that out. Maybe I'm gonna go to Scottsdale. I keep punching this thing too many times, it's gonna go back forward. Scottsdale's GPCD, gallons per capita per day, is 123. Goodyear's 83. So that's how much water each person uses. 100% of Goodyear's water supply is groundwater. So everybody that lives on the west side of the Agua Fria River doesn't get any SRP water, Salt River Project water, surface water. We only have groundwater available to us. And so 100% of our water comes from the ground. They do have an allotment of Colorado River water that they have purchased, but it's being recharged somewhere else in the valley, in recharge basins somewhere else in the valley, but they get credit for putting that water into the ground. So they just are in the process, and they may have just recently completed a pipe taking water from the end of the SRP canal system and bringing their Colorado River water directly to them and not being recharged somewhere else in the valley. And then they're going to put that in with their reclaimed wastewater, and they're going to no, they're not going to put it in their reclaimed wastewater. We're not allowing that yet in Arizona. They're putting it in with their groundwater that they're pumping out of the ground. They're going to mix it instead of putting it in somewhere else. And they're going to actually send that out as potable drinking water to the public. They're very excited. They got an award recently for the whole concept of what they're doing. And then they're retaining their wastewater and putting it in water recharge basins within the city. So all of their water, their wastewater will be recharged above the city of Goodyear in different locations. And their Colorado River water is going to be brought to them and mixed with their groundwater that they're pumping out of the ground and sent out as potable drinking water. So there's their breakup of their supply. They have 30% reclaimed water. So they're taking all of this water. Once it goes back to the wastewater treatment plant, what isn't put out in landscaping goes to the wastewater treatment plant, and then they're recharging that amount of water back into the groundwater. So Arizona is quite unique. We have a bifurcated water management system. So our surface water is, which of course is subject to that prior appropriation. So quantity is not an issue because whoever got there first has first rights, and then it backs up from there. The next person has the next amount of water. The only thing that's overseen about surface water is by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. So they look at water quality and oversee that and manage that aspect of our surface water supply, but we don't have anybody looking at the quantity. Our groundwater is, again, under the similar rules of needing to be used for reasonable and beneficial use. And you historically, like the farmers that have farmed in this region for a long time, whatever they've historically drawn out of the groundwater is their limit. They can't increase that groundwater amount, but they don't have to stop pumping that water. Unless you're in an active management area, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but in 1980, groundwater management only in those overpumped regions of Arizona were being managed by the Arizona Department of Water Resources, which didn't exist until 1980, until that 1980 Groundwater Act was passed. So we have a really unusual water management system in Arizona. So I am going to share a video with you now.
Episode 1, The Unique Hydrological Cycle of Arizona. Arizona, best known for the breathtaking Grand Canyon and the red rocks of Sedona, and its bustling cities, like Phoenix and Tucson, is also known for a more challenging feature, its semi-arid dry climate. Well over half of the state is defined as desert or dry grassland, with an average yearly temperature of about 84 degrees. And here's the thing, in Arizona, we lose an average of 7 times more water to the atmosphere than we receive from it. So that means a lot more water is going up than coming down. This becomes very important when you consider that every living creature needs water to survive. Like, for example, blue here, a great blue heron. Common to our state, this large bird can be found around water and soaring above our landscape, making him the perfect guide to Arizona's hydrological secrets. Ecosystems throughout Arizona, including those found in the desert, rely on water that arrives in many different ways. As long as humans have lived here, they have been finding ways to collect, preserve, and manage as much water as possible. Through naturally occurring and engineered systems, people have been quite successful in their efforts, enabling generations to thrive in this arid environment. In a constant race against evaporation and drought cycles, Arizona's scientists, engineers, and policymakers have moved water from one place to another, channeling it through canals to places where it can be used or stored for later. However, there is another source of life-giving water, one not seen by the naked eye. And to find it, we don't need to look from this vantage point, but instead, we just have to look down at our feet. That's right, our feet. Because below the surface of where you are right now, a huge resource exists. It turns out 98% of Earth's available freshwater is what's known as groundwater. Yep, you got it. Water underground. So, is there groundwater for us to use here where we live? In fact, there is, and we have been pumping wells to get it out of the ground for many, many years now. Without question, groundwater has been the most essential resource in Arizona to grow our food, manufacture products, and to use right in our homes every day. But how much of this groundwater can we really use? Watch episode 2 for a deeper dive into groundwater.
So that's our segue into groundwater. Do we have some questions, Dave?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
All right. So the first one was from Fred. How much of the water reduction correlates to a reduction in agricultural lands?
Actually, in the state of Arizona, we have lost probably more agricultural lands in Maricopa County than in any of the other counties in Arizona. But most of that water savings was actually from using conservation devices and building homes with with less water usage, and pushing xeriscaping and desert adapted plants in landscaping. So we're seeing more of that. And I think we've done a pretty good job of making people aware of the fact that they live in a desert and they need to conserve and not use as much as they would elsewhere, where more water falls from the sky.
Okay. Ian says, is the naming of the Colorado River water as different from in-state rivers because we don't share water from the Gila, Salt, or Verde, but do from the Colorado?
Ask the first part of that question again.
Is the naming of the Colorado River water as different from in-state rivers because we don't share water from the Gila, Salt, or Verde, but do from the Colorado?
So back in the early 1900s, the 7 basin states met for several years arguing about water rights on the Colorado River. And we finally reached an agreement in 1922 and signed an agreement dividing the river up between the upper basin states and the lower basin states. And we'll talk about that a little later. But Arizona was the only state that didn't sign the compact. And it was because California wanted us, we had already, the first reclamation project built in the West was Roosevelt Dam on the Salt River. It was completed in 1911, and we had several dams already built on the Gila and the Salt and the Verde, and they wanted us to tear those down and let that water go to the Colorado, and then we could turn around and bring our share of the Colorado back here. And we said, well, that doesn't financially make a whole lot of sense. And there were other issues involved with that whole lawsuit that then prevailed after that. But then I'm not sure what you mean by the naming of the Colorado.
Ian, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, just real quick, because so Colorado River water was separated out as a different piece of the pie than in-state rivers, and obviously the Colorado not only flows through the state of Arizona, but is our western border. So it is by definition an in-state river, but was delineated separately. And I think you answered it, but that was part of my question is, like, we don't have to share what's in the Gila, because it is all in-state, but yet the Colorado is not, and we share it with California and Nevada and other states.
And in the Gila actually starts in New Mexico. and then flows through Maricopa County, where the Salt River flows in. There's a lot of tributaries flow into the Gila, but because of the damming of those rivers, the Gila River doesn't make it to the Colorado. We have a few rivers that do. The Bill Williams does, the Little Colorado does, but we've dammed up our other rivers and kept them supplying water to our major population sites. So, yeah, a lot of politics in those stories. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Yeah, there's about 3 more.
Okay.
How much do we expect the new chip plants to impact the water use numbers and percentages?
So that new one out there on the 303, I don't know if you guys have seen it or not. It was huge, just huge. They built their own turnout off the CAP canal to supply water to that plant. They purchased an allotment from probably some Native American tribe. The same with the community of Anthem. Anthem only exists because Del Webb bought an allotment from one of the Native American tribes and put their own turnout and their own water treatment plant to build the community of Anthem. So what's going to happen on the Colorado is a big issue, and we're going to get into that a little later. But the municipalities' first rights on the Colorado River water allotments are the Native American tribes. There are 22 tribes in Arizona. I think all but 2 of them have satisfied settled their water rights. They will be the last to lose water. Our cities and municipalities will be the next to lose water. The farming community will be the first to lose water. That's already happened in Pinal County. The Pinal County farmers lost when we did that first loss of Colorado River water. They lost their rights to that water, and what they're doing is refurbishing their pumps and pumping groundwater out of the ground again. They were an over pumped area of Arizona and were in one of those major AMAs that the Department of the Arizona Department of Water Resources was formed to manage. And it's going to be an interesting thing to see what happens with our groundwater supply in central Arizona.
Okay, and one more, it's kind of a biggie. Could you elaborate on the future of the Colorado River rights between the upper and lower basin states? And then it goes on to say, I know the past year was pretty wet and did lead to some recharge levels, but are still very low, and we can anticipate future droughts. Also, what do you anticipate for how Arizona and other lower basin states will divvy up the Colorado River water? Will the Fed government have to step in and mediate?
We're going to get to that in the next segment.
All right. And then, okay, will you also touch on how that will, what that will mean for reservation water rights?
Again, they will be the last to lose their water.
Okay.
And so the Gila River Indian community between here and Casa Grande has probably the largest allotment of water off the Central Arizona Project canal system. And they will become, I can guarantee you, they will become the largest farming operation in Arizona, because the other farming operations will probably go away, and they will start. They have a lot of irrigable land that they're not farming right now, but they have the rights to plenty of water to increase what they're farming right now. And so they will, the Native American tribes will be the last to lose their water.
All right. And then we're all caught up.
Okay. So 40% in-state, 40% across the state of Arizona, 40% of the water used is groundwater. So almost half of the water. So if you think about it, not very many rivers are flowing across the state of Arizona, and yet there's people that live all over the place, and they're dependent on wells sunk into the ground to pull that groundwater out. So, but in Maricopa County, 45% of our water supply is groundwater. And we think about that, we have the Salt River Project, right? And all of that water that's being stored behind all the dams for in the Salt River Project system. And yet we still have a higher percentage of the water that we use comes from the ground. And that's because there's so many people that live here, 46 or 4.6 million people. Everything west of the Olafria River, so Goodyear, Avondale, Buckeye, parts of Surprise, all are dependent on groundwater. All dependent on groundwater. And that's where our growth is happening right now. It's like Buckeye and Goodyear and Avondale are just going crazy. They're going moving out, building out in Rainbow Valley on the other side of the mountain range. Buckeye's going, God, they're going to build probably all the way out to Gila Bend. It's just amazing the growth that's happening. So all of those areas are dependent on groundwater. So that groundwater is going to increase. And we'll talk about the AMAs and the groundwater. Each AMA has a different goal that they have to achieve, being overseen by the Arizona Department of Water Resources. And we'll get into a little bit more specificity in that in a few slides from now, excuse me. So where do we find groundwater? Between the earth materials and the ground beneath the surface of the earth, right? It's not in lakes, it's not underground, it's not in rivers flowing underground. It's just between the earth materials, between the gravel and the sand and the rocks. And how do we get it out of the ground? We drill wells and we pump that water out of the ground. This is an old well drilling apparatus. You'll see the steel pipe that on the right side right there, or left side. And that's actually a cutting saw that's to the left of that thing that looks like a dreidel actually spins, and that's what cuts a hole down in the earth. And the dirt travels up to the top, and every well that's dug, they have to track the kind of soil that they are removing from the hole as they drill the well. And so it doesn't collapse on itself. As they drill down, they'll put a section of steel pipe down. They'll drill some more, put another section of steel pipe down until they get to the depth that they want to get. On average in Arizona and the Phoenix metropolitan area, the average water is anywhere from 300 to 1,000 feet below the surface. So here's a diagram of a reverse rotary drilling. You see where that above ground mud pit is pulling that earth materials and putting it in an earth pit. And then they have to track how many feet of gravel, how many feet of this, and each one of the types of earth materials that they come across that they pull out of the ground, it has a design and a color. And so they actually draw a design of the earth as they pulled it out. And then when they compare that with other wells in the area, they can kind of see how the kind of earth materials ebb and weave through the aquifer. They'll go down till they hit water, and then they'll go down probably another 1,500 feet to get more clear water. And then when they actually complete the well and turn the pump on, it actually draws the water down, the water table down. And so they want to make sure that the drawdown isn't beyond the bottom of the well casing. So you can tell on this diagram, the water table is down here. They still have quite a ways to drill before they get down here past that water table. This is that saturated area. There's water up here, but there's also air up here. So they have to drill down and get to that totally saturated area. And then the top of that totally saturated area is called the water table. And it's somewhat flat, and that's why they call it a table. The top of it gravity's pulling it down and it's somewhat flat. It's going to, as it moves, and as it runs into different earth materials, it might hit like a little granite outcropping. The weight of the water and then the down slope is going to push that up and over that outcropping, and your aquifer is going to be a little higher in this area than it would be over here. So here's a groundwater well. Here's your static water level, which is your water table. You have your drawdown, and then when we put the impellers down in the bottom of the well casing, if we just turned it on, we'd just be pulling mud out of the ground. So they have to put a well screen, and they do. It's usually a triple layered well screen going from bigger to smaller to filter out the earth materials, so that we, number one, don't chew up the impeller, we don't ruin the pump on the top of the ground, and the water's somewhat clear when we get it to the surface. Water weighs 8.34 pounds per gallon. My family farms in the West Valley, and our well, the bottom of our well is at 640 feet, and it's a 12-inch pipe. So 12 inches, maybe a pipe in that diameter, probably about every 8 to 10 inches is a gallon. So if we're pumping from 640 feet, that's over 1,000 gallons of water at 8.34 pounds per gallon. We're pulling almost 8,500 pounds of water from the bottom of that well to the surface. It takes a big pump and a lot of electricity to run that pump to pull that water out of the ground to the surface. And this is one of the reasons that one of the main reasons that the Arizona Department of Water Resources was formed by the 1980 Groundwater Act. We pulled more water out of the ground than naturally fell from the sky. So we just kept lowering that water table and lowering that water table and lowering that water table. And one of the things that occurs is water kind of holds up the ground. It fills up those spaces. And when you remove that water, the weight of that ground ends up just settling and pushing those smaller particles in between the bigger particles. And you end up having the actual surface of the earth drop. That subsidence, where my family farms in the West Valley, has dropped probably 12 feet in the last 100 years. The water table in downtown Phoenix had dropped 100 feet, the water table, by 1980, the previous 100 years. We had to do something. So they formed the Arizona Department of Water Resources and put the overpumped regions into what they call active management areas, Phoenix being one of them. And each one of those active management areas has different goals that they are trying to achieve. So in this particular slide, though, when that ground collapses, we call it subsidence. And we get around the edges of the areas, it might be 5-10 miles across this whole overpumped region. And as that ground settles, it actually causes fissures around the perimeter of that area. And we have some fissures in central Arizona, in Pinal County, that run some 5 miles long, that you can see 20-30 feet down into the ground in these fissures. So where in the West Valley, the overpumping and the subsidence area on the east side started at about Olive and El Mirage Road. And you would come down Olive Avenue. For years, we would drive down Olive Avenue, and we'd actually drive down like you were going into a river bottom. And they would repair every year, they'd repair that spot in the road. They just repair it over and over and over again. But they just, the road just, the ground just kept subsiding. So that has happened all over the state of Arizona. There are 5 active management areas and 2 INAs where they have totally different, they have overpumping problems, but they have different resolutions to those problems. So here's the Prescott AMA, the active management area. That area was overpumped. It's over 485 square miles. It has 2 sub-basins beneath it that were overpumped. They have an actual, their water usage, their draw was like 20,000 acre feet a year, which for Prescott that's a lot of water. Phoenix AMA is 5,600 square miles. It consists of 7 sub-basins across the valley. And within that, there's 287,000 acres of farmland and 2 million acre feet. An acre foot is enough water to cover an acre, which is about the size of a football field, a foot deep. And that's enough water to supply a couple of families of 4 for a year. So they pump, we've pumped over 2 million acre feet of water every year out of the Phoenix AMA. The Pinal AMA, Casa Grande, that whole area between here and Tucson, it's over 4,000 square miles. It consists of 5 subbasins. It's 260,000 acres of non-Indian farmland. So they're not counting the Gila River Indian community in these numbers. And then over 80,000 acre feet of non-Indian water use. Oh, darn it. Tucson AMA, 3,800 square miles, 2 subbasins, 300,000 acre feet annually pumped in that area. And Santa Cruz AMA, 750 square miles, 1 subbasin, there's just one aquifer beneath them, and over 20,000 acre feet annually pumped from that area. So each one of those areas too has its own goal it has to achieve. The Phoenix AMA goal is to reach safe yield by 2025. That's next year. That means that they have to be putting just as much water in the ground, recharging just as much water in the ground as they're pulling out. We've done a pretty good job, but we're not there yet. We have brought that water table back in the Phoenix metropolitan area up to that 100-foot loss that we had seen 100 years prior. So it is working. It's just that we're not achieving it as quickly and as soon as we thought we would. And how we're recharging that water. So what we knew in 1980, which enabled us to pass this law, was that we knew the Central Arizona Project water was being constructed and was going to bring water to Central Arizona. And we knew we could use that water to recharge the groundwater that we were pulling out. So to this day, most of that water that's coming down the Central Arizona Project Canal is being used for either agriculture or for recharge for the municipalities to replenish the water that they're pulling out. And we do that, all we do is we just go out in the middle of the desert and we grade it flat, push that dirt up and make these recharge basins. And you can see a picture here of a series of 3 basins right off of the Central Arizona Project Canal. We fill those, that ground percolates really fast because it's got a lot of sand and gravel in it. And so it goes down, gravity pulls it down really quickly. And so it's all scientifically, and they have to look at the science of it. They pick the location because of the soil. And they know that they can't fill it more than maybe 3 foot deep. They'll fill one of the basins 3 foot deep and let it soak in. They'll get about halfway empty, they'll fill the next one, and then they'll fill the next one, and then they'll fill the next one, and then they'll come back and do it again. So it gives the basins 2 or 3 days of percolation time. And they do that, they pick the soil because the faster it can percolate, the less water is going to evaporate off of that surface. When we spread that water out, water evaporates from the surface. And so we want to get it to go down in that ground as quickly as we can. Gravity pulls it down into that aquifer, and then we pull it back up and use it for our homes. That replenishes that water that we're pulling out. So that's that safe yield. We have to achieve putting the same amount in as we're pulling out. If you're going to build a housing development somewhere, they have to prove that they have a 100-year water supply in an AMA. And so they have to prove that wherever they're going to build this, there's either enough groundwater or they can get enough surface water to them so that they have an assured 100-year water supply. Again, part of that 1980 Groundwater Act. I am going to show you, I believe this is video 2. Oh, and I'm going to pause just for a second. Let's see if I can pause it. We got Arizona Project Wet approached Arizona Department of Water Resources and got a grant from them to actually make a series of 9 groundwater videos that we use in the classroom and that we use with the public to educate them about groundwater. It's such a complex issue for most people. I mean, because it's underground, we can't see it. We don't understand how it works. And most adults don't understand how groundwater works. And so we, in partnership with Esser Design, we designed these 4, they were a blast. That was just a lot of fun to make. These 9 groundwater videos building on the knowledge and at the end. So I'm going to tease you guys with 2 of them tonight, and then I'm hoping you'll watch the other 7. They're only 3 to 4 minutes in length and full of a lot of really good information. So I'm going to start this second one.
So 2, groundwater basics. Knowing that there is a vast resource of available fresh water below the surface of Arizona's landscape is one thing. But getting to it and knowing how much of it we can use, that is an entirely different matter. Looking through Blue's eyes, we can see that wells are drilled deep into the ground using a drill rig. As each length of pipe is added, the borehole is drilled deeper. A driller or geologist logs the physical measurements such as depth and the types of earth materials like rocks, sand, and gravel they encounter along the way. Once the borehole is drilled into the groundwater, the drill rig is used to lower the well casing into the ground. The screen zone with a filter pack around it is set in the zone where the groundwater is. A pump is then used to bring the groundwater to the surface. Geologists then use many borehole logs like this one across a distance of miles and miles to create a picture of what it might look like beneath our feet. This is called a cross-section. Cities like Phoenix regularly drill wells close to 2 feet in diameter and to depths of hundreds of feet. Here, you can see the wells across our state. They are located where groundwater can be accessed and extracted from what are known as aquifers. There are 3 basic types of aquifers found in Arizona: basin-filled aquifers, fractured rock aquifers, and sandstone aquifers. In the Colorado Plateau uplands, the Coconino Sandstone Aquifer is Flagstaff's primary source of groundwater. It is around 1,500 feet below the surface. Many residents in the Central Highland Zone, the mountainous area around Prescott, rely on fractured hard rock aquifers where the amount of water available depends on the number of rock fractures that cross the well. But most of the groundwater used in Arizona comes from basin-fill aquifers. Basin-fill aquifers are bowl-shaped spaces underground that consist of sand and gravel eroded from the nearby mountain ranges. Over time, they have become storage areas for groundwater. Commonly called valley-fill aquifers, they produce most of the groundwater used in Arizona. The total volume of groundwater within roughly a mile from the Earth's surface is approximately 18.3 quadrillion acre-feet. Just 1 acre-foot is enough water to cover an acre of land, about the size of a football field, 1 foot deep. Enough to supply a few families with water for a whole year. Water is always entering the groundwater system through recharge. And once it's there, it typically spends a long time underground. Research shows that a lot of our groundwater recharged the aquifer system over tens of thousands of years ago. Now that is really, really old. About 70% of groundwater withdrawn worldwide is used for agriculture, and groundwater provides almost half of all drinking water worldwide. 41% of the water used in Arizona comes from groundwater. Who knew that groundwater was such an important resource? So now we know where the groundwater is, and we know how to get it to the surface. But does groundwater just endlessly fill back up when we remove it? Watch episode 3 for an inside look at the groundwater system.
So I'm going to stop there. Just a real quick, you've heard that Arizona, and you may not have heard, but Arizona is called a basin and range state. So that means that the range, the mountain ranges, erode and are pulled by weathering, whether it be wind or water, down into the basins. And those basins are filled with that eroded material from the rocks. And so our valleys are filled, and that's why we have a lot of basin filled aquifers in Arizona. It's because that's where those small pieces of rock have been washed down into the valleys, and they hold water in those pore spaces between the earth materials that have been washed down. So we're going to move into watersheds and our surface water supplies for Arizona next. And I think we are supposed to, I can take some more questions, and I think we're supposed to take a break, right?
Yes, let's take a 10-minute break. My clock shows 7:01, so we'll reconvene at 7:11. And there were a bunch of questions to address from this segment when we come back.
Okie doke.
Yep, we are good to go. Here we go. All right. So the first one is from Ian. It says, for the Colorado River discussion, great to hear about the allotment for GRIC, but my understanding is that the Navajo Nation is still fighting the water rights from the Colorado that they're looking for. What's the latest there?
Okay, Ian, so the Navajo Nation, the Diné people are one of those 2 tribes that I talked about earlier that have not reached a settlement. And what they are hoping for and are negotiating with the U.S. Bureau of Rec and federal government is for there to be a delivery device, a project built to bring water from the river to the tribal nation. The Central Arizona Project Canal, it took us years and years and years and years to pay that thing off. And it was billions and billions of dollars to build that 336-mile long canal from Lake Havasu to Tucson. And they're hoping that the federal government will step in and help fund that, so that they can get their allotment. So that's a very general description of what's going on, and that probably won't be satisfied anytime in the near future.
Okay, from Sean, is there a requirement for a geologist to survey or approve new wells to ensure minimal disturbance to the ground composition?
If you're not in an AMA, do whatever you want to do. If you're in an AMA, as long as it's an exempt well, which is any kind of a domestic well that pumps less than 35 gallons per minute or less, you don't need any kind of you need to get a well drilling permit, but they're not going to stop you from drilling a well. Anything over that amount has to be cleared through the Department of Water Resources, because we are in an AMA.
Okay. Another from Ian. Is the open desert basically bladed in order to make these recharge basins?
Yeah, I think I described that. They just clear the plants, they just dig down, a couple of feet and just burn that, take that extra soil and burn it up and fill that area with water.
Okay. Joette wants to know, does Lake Pleasant function as a recharging place?
Actually, originally Lake Pleasant was owned by the farm community called Maricopa Water District. And they built the Waddell Dam and just dammed up the Agua Fria River. The board of directors of MWD met with the CAWCD, that overarching body for the Central Arizona Project Canal, and agreed to allow them to build a bigger, newer dam. And the Lake Pleasant became, not only is it still partially owned by MWD and the Agua Fria water still belongs to them, but the CAP water that's brought in, so snow melts in the spring. So we have more water in the Colorado River and in the reservoirs on the Colorado River, or any river in the West, any river in the West is going to be flow more in the spring as snow melts. So that's when they need to bring that water down and put it somewhere. And so the reservoir at Lake Pleasant, they increased the capacity, the height of the dam and the width of the dam so that they could use Lake Pleasant as the storage facility for that water, that snow melt water that is part of our allotment that we bring into the state of Arizona. We have, I think, 2.8 million acre feet is our allotment. 1.3 of that is taken right off the river. Several Indian tribes, Yuma, the farmers in Yuma pull that water directly off the river. And the 1.5 that they don't use, we bring up into Central Arizona through that canal. And so it is stored in Lake Pleasant. So you'll notice in this late spring, Lake Pleasant will be more full. And in the winter, it'll be lower because we've utilized that stored water in that lake.
All right. And then the final question from Amir regarding the Navajo reservation water rights. So they have allotment, but no way of getting the water.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. Yep.
All right. And then that concludes all the questions right now.
And just to clarify, the Gila River Indian community takes their allotment off of the Central Arizona Project Canal. They have done just an amazing job of building a water delivery infrastructure on their native lands, and they'll be able to irrigate thousands of acres. They were prepared for that. They knew it was coming, and they have done a great job. But they're right there. I mean, the CAP goes right through the middle of those tribal lands. Colorado River is a long way from the Navajo Nation, and they don't have the funds to bring that water. So the other 20 tribes in Arizona got allotments. Most of them can't afford a delivery canal to bring water to them. And so they've sold or long-term leased those allotments to City of Goodyear, City of Phoenix, to different entities, and they're making money even though they're not getting water. Hope that helps. That was our last question.
That was the last question. Yeah.
Okay, keep those questions coming. So now we're going to move into the Colorado River. Not physically.
Are you still there, Pam?
Yeah, I was reading, I'm trying to get my slides changed.
Okay.
Apologies. So the Colorado River supplies 30% of the water supply for the state of Arizona, and about the same amount for Maricopa County. So it's surface waters, but it's considered a separate source for Arizona. We have in-state water, And this is a separate source of water, and they count it that way when they're looking because it's used very differently than our in-state water. So the headwaters for the Colorado are in Wyoming. The Green River starts in Wyoming. And the Colorado River also starts, the other headwater starts in Colorado. They're both, and how they name a river, it's based on the farthest point from the end of that river, whether it be a delta or whether it moves into another, is a tributary to another river. So whichever is the farthest away from the point for the Colorado River, it's the Gulf of California. And they're almost, well, a mile or two different in length. So they both claim to be the headwaters of the Colorado. So it's 1,450 miles long. Its drainage basin covers 246,000 square miles, and it drains portions of 7 states in the United States and 2 in Mexico. It supports 40 million people. It is the hardest working river in the United States. So who had rights to that river was argued for several years, and they finally met, and this group being led by Herbert Hoover, who was Secretary of the Interior at the time, was met several times and tried to reach an agreement, and they just argued and argued and argued and argued. And they finally decided that they would divvy up the Colorado River between the upper basin states and the lower basin states. And so the upper basin states are Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. And the lower basin states are Arizona, Nevada, and California. And so each portion, so they estimated that there was 17.5 million acre feet of water running down that river every year. So they divvied up 15 million of that, giving 7.5 million acre feet to the upper basin and 7.5 to the lower basin, leaving 2.3 million acre feet for the river. Okay. Mexico wasn't invited to the table. And even though it runs through 2 states in Mexico and dumps in the delta in their country. All was said and done, Arizona was the only of the 7 basin states that did not sign that agreement. And we talked about that a little bit, that California wanted us to allow all of our waters to go to the Colorado and then bring it back to us. And we said that we wouldn't do that. And I don't believe so we just didn't sign the agreement. Several years went by and we sued California. Arizona v. California. It was in court for like 40 years. And we finally got a decision in the late 60s. And we won, but we lost. So we got our allotment. We didn't have to tear our dams down. But we were given the junior water right on the river of the lower basin states, which means when we're in a drought, when there's a shortage on the river, Arizona is the first one to take the hit. That was the agreement that we reached in court after 40 years. We put a lot of attorneys' kids through college. These were the negotiators at the table. 7 people from each state in the United States, and our Department of Interior was the chair of those negotiations. So the upper basin got to divide it any way they wanted to, and they're 7.5 million. So Colorado got 52% of it, Wyoming got 14, Utah got 23, and New Mexico got 11. A lot of that was based on population, lots of discussions, but at that point, Colorado's population was much higher than the rest of the states. In the lower basin, between the 3 states, Arizona got 38%, Nevada got 4%, and California got 58%. Again, based on population, that was how we divvied it up. You can imagine Nevada didn't even want to come to the table to even negotiate I think there were something like 500 people living in Las Vegas. It was just a little stage stop in 1922. It did not become the metropolis that it is now for many years. And so they weren't concerned, and they only got 0.3 million acre feet, but that was based again on population. Again, reiterating, Mexico not at the table. So the division line of the upper and lower basin is based on watershed geography. So the boundaries between the upper and lower is a very irregular shape because it's following the peaks and the high points in the watershed. Lee's Ferry is the dividing line between the upper basin states and the lower basin states. And Lee's Ferry is below Glen Canyon Dam, below Lake Powell. That's the dividing line. So there's the monitor there, measuring the amount of flow. There's flow metering along the entire river, but that's our dividing line. So we finally met with Mexico because they were going to start a war with us over the Rio Grande, actually. And so our treaty with Mexico in 1944 included the Rio Grande and the Colorado River. And we gave them, remember, we said we left, was it 2.3 million acres in the river for the river? Well, we gave Mexico 1.5 million acre feet of water, which was a total of 16.5. And their estimate at the time was that there was 17.5 million acres. So they were leaving 1 million acre feet of water in the river. Except their technology wasn't what we have today. And the only data they had was from the 20 years previous to 1922. So we have found out since with our new technology that it was probably the wettest period of time in 1,200 years on that river. And it never has flowed to that quantity. I mean, it may have a couple of times over the course of the last 100 years, but on average, it does not flow 17.5. I think the average right now that they're estimating is 13 something. So, and yet we've allocated 16.5. So we're overusing that water, and that's what all the negotiations, nobody wants to go back to the table and give up their portion of their allotment on the river. And so there's just push and shove, and I'm not going to do this if you don't do this, and all kinds of things going on. But we have over allocated what is the real flow of the river. So estimated flow is 17.3, amount allocated 16.5. Current estimate is 12.5 to 13.5, and we have that junior water right. So there's the Lee's Ferry on the dividing line. And you can see how the upper basin and lower basin division line is based on topography, not necessarily a straight line drawn on a map. Because if those are the high points, what's going to flow on one side is going to flow into the upper basin states, and what's going to flow on the other side of the mountain is going to flow into the lower basin state. So this is put out by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. It's a great site if you want to go there and just cruise through the site. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation only exists west of the Mississippi River. It is a state agency that has no control over what happens east of the Mississippi. And they have some great diagrams, great information. They track these rivers and the dams and the outputs from the dams every minute. And you can find the water flowing out of the dam, information about anything you want about the reservoirs and the dams on the Colorado River and other river systems in the West on the U.S. Bureau of Rec site. So this is the upper basin states. Again, here's the headwaters up in Wyoming, and there's a reservoir called Fontanelle, and it's at 50% full right now. This was as of 2 days ago. The Flaming Gorge Reservoir is 85% full. Morrow Point, now the cups represent kind of the quantity in each one of the reservoirs. So the bigger the cup, the bigger the quantity, the bigger the reservoir itself. Mora Point's 95, Blue Mesa 69, Navajo Reservoir is at 66, Lake Powell 35. You could add all these together and they still wouldn't do much wouldn't impact this percentage in Powell. Powell is so big. So Powell, again, upper basin states, that's kind of their control reservoir. That's what they do their releases and from to give water to the lower basin states. Lake Mead is our kind of water controlling reservoir, and it's now currently, as of 2 days ago, 36% full, up from 32% last year. Lake Mojave, Lake Havasu, all at 92, 94. They stay usually about that high. They're very small compared to Lake Mead. This is the control valve for the lower basin states. So this is the third drought that we've been in the last 100 years. This one's lasted over 30. As you can see, the seasonal drought outlook, this is from January to April of this year. Most of Arizona is going to stay dry and in a drought. This is the worst drought in the past 1,200 years. And as we said, you know, that new technology, we have probably the most famous state-of-the-art tree ring laboratory on the University of Arizona campus. That science of tree ring is called dendrochronology. And that's how we can look at the width of the growth on a tree ring, which represents a year's growth. The more narrow the tree ring growth, the less rainfall that tree saw that year. The wider the tree ring, the more moisture, whether it be snowpack or rainfall, that tree saw. And so we are able to date back over 1,000 years, looking at 1,000-year-old trees and even comparing petrified wood trees, knowing their age and when they fell, and comparing it with living trees in the area. It's a really interesting science that I just love going. I've toured their lab several times, and it's just really interesting. But that told us that that period, that 20-year period of time on the river that they were basing its sharing from, was the most that river had seen in over 1,200 years. Just crazy. And we are again in a drought that's lasting over 30 years. And this may be the new norm because of global climate change. We're going to see the less precipitation. That water's not going outside of the Earth system. It's just moving somewhere else. So it's not going to fall here, but it's going to fall somewhere else. And we're seeing flooding in other parts of the country. And that's because that's our water that's going over there and being dumped on somebody else. So we're going to get less precipitation, and our temperature is going to go up, which means we're going to get more evaporation. And if you remember from that one of our Project Wet videos on groundwater, we lose 7% more, 7 times more water to evaporation than we get from precipitation falling from the sky. And that's going to get worse. So Lake Mead, there's a picture of Lake Mead showing that bathtub ring that is the top of that white ring is where the water used to be. And they use those teacup diagrams, which I think are really interesting, because again, a watershed is a land area where water is pulled from the high points, which are the mountains or the hills, to the low points, which are the valleys. And so a valley is kind of cup-shaped, and it's gonna hold less at the bottom of the cup than it is at the top of the cup. And so this water right here behind the dam might be a couple hundred feet deep, but it's only a third, 36% of what the capacity would be if it's filled all the way up to the line. Just because there's more space, because it's a valley that's V-shaped. So right now, Lake Mead is at 1,072 feet. Yeah, 1,000, and it's 36% capacity. So we hit what they call, so in our shortage sharing agreement that the 7 basin states reached, we said that at shortage, there are going to be certain shortage levels, and as we hit each level, we're going to lose more and more water. Well, we hit shortage level 2 years ago, shortage level 1 2 years ago. We lost our first allotment. We hit shortage level 2 year and a half ago. 2 years ago. Last year we were at level 2. We actually had a pretty good snowpack, and we're seeing that water filling back up. So we're back up to shortage level 1, but we're still not going to. We don't have to cut any more than we've cut, but we are still using that shortage level 1 less being brought to us from the Central Arizona Project Canal. So when the Colorado River meets the Delta, it just is a dribble because not much of it is getting down there. We have done some really interesting things with Yuma County agricultural water runoff from the fields, and we've sent it to an area called the Santa Clara, what's the name of it? Anyway, it's our tailwater coming off of our ag farms, and it's actually better water, even with the ag chemicals in it, than is getting to the Delta, because this water is really, really salty, and it's just a trickle, doesn't get down there. Now, Mexico gets its 1.5 million acre feet that we agreed upon. They take that in 2 projects. One is the Tijuana Aqueduct, and the other is they have another aqueduct that takes water. So that one takes water to Tijuana, and the other one takes it out. There's a huge farming region between the Colorado River and Tijuana, where the second canal takes water to, and takes their 1.5 million acre feet. So again, we bring our 1.5 of our allotment of 2.3 to Central Arizona through the Central Arizona Project Canal. It was constructed, it took 20 years to build, and it was completed in 93. It goes from the Lake Havasu by the Parker Dam to Tucson. It delivers 1.4 million acre feet of water per year, and it irrigates 130,000 acres. And it provides municipal water to about 5 million people. Again, most of that being used as recharge. This was the drought contingency group that actually signed that plan, that everybody agreed to make those cuts. And I'm going to show you those cuts. And this is kind of, I will share this PowerPoint with you, and you can read some of this. This is kind of an overview of what the drought contingency plan agreed to. But here are the cuts, which I think are really interesting. At tier 1, so when the elevation, so the elevation from sea level to the top of the lake is what they measure. So that 1,090 is tier 0. That means the lake is full. When it gets down to 175 feet below sea level or above sea level, we hit tier 1. And here, tier 1 is purple. So Arizona lost 192,000 acre feet of water when we hit tier 1, and Nevada lost 8,000 acre feet, California none. We hit tier 2 at 1,050 feet, which we did last year. We lost another 512,000. We didn't put that back, so we're now down, what would that be, 700,000 acre feet of water annually, and Nevada lost 21. Now remember, they only have 0.3 allotment. So tier 2 or tier 2B, which is going to be, or Tier two is 1,050 feet, it's 592,000. Tier 2B, they put like one in between 2 and 3 to make some people happy. And we lose, when we hit that, we lose another 640,000. Nevada loses 27, and California takes their first hit at 200,000. And then when we hit tier 3, when we gets down to 1,025 feet, we lose that all added together. So another 720K, Nevada 30, and California 350. Again, California has senior water rights because we are the junior water user on the river. So we have to take the big cuts. Let's see. It's not progressing for me again. It's so weird. There we go. So here's a little video I'm going to play for you. I wonder it's not X. Let's see. This is, we'll have to skip it. It's not going to play. I don't know why, but the, no, maybe it is now. There we go. So this is Tom Bushotsky, the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and Ed Cook, he was the director of the CAWC, the Central Arizona Project Canal. He retired, and actually Brenda Berman, who was the director of U.S. Bureau of Rec, is now running CAP. After his retirement, they hired her. It's not going to load, is it? My apologies. It was playing just fine earlier.
But one of the most important things about the drought contingency plan is that it is a collaborative effort among all of the states, but specifically for our drought contingency plan with California, Nevada, Arizona, and the Bureau of Reclamation. The path forward to deal with issues on the Colorado River is collaboration. That way, no one state might feel the brunt of shortages. No one state will have to take actions alone that might not be able to really achieve the goals that we can achieve collectively. And additional benefits accrue because Mexico will participate with us as soon as we sign the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan in the United States.
One of the benefits of the drought contingency plan too is in this partnership that Tom mentioned among the 3 lower basin states, United States and Mexico, is that there is an escalating commitment to the success of DCP, the bending the curve that occurs. This is the key mechanism of how the DCP will work. All of us together leaving water in the lake, the lower it goes, the more we leave in, the slower it goes down from that point going forward. The DCP is a plan that that the benefits will be delivered over a period of time. And we are just above the 1075 shortage here right now. As we've said earlier, that the goal is to prevent getting down to the much lower shortage tiers below 1050 and below 1025. It will take some time to get there. But by starting now, the more leverage that we have, the more momentum we have to prevent that from happening later.
So the drought contingency plan is tied to the 2007 guidelines, which expired at the end of 2026. The sooner we get the drought contingency plan in effect, the more benefits we will accrue between now and 2026, when both it and the 2007 guidelines expire. So again, as Ted said, the sooner we start, the bigger the benefit. So that is driving the urgency as much as anything.
over the last several years, including this year, 2018, we have been able to, through conservation and other efforts, to keep the level of Lake Mead above the first shortage tier of 1,075 feet. However, after 18 years of drought and the levels of Lake Mead and Lake Powell right now, it is probably impossible to do that. But that doesn't mean that we will not keep doing the same things that we have been doing. And with better hydrology in the upper basin, it is possible that we might avoid another year of shortage, or the first year of shortage in 2020, but that will not be from the conservation efforts without better hydrology.
But no, the drought contingency plan is not designed to avoid a shortage declaration on the Colorado River. It's designed to protect against deep cuts, deep shortages in the Colorado River that might occur if we don't find ways to take additional actions to protect Lake Mead.
So we know that it did slow it down, but we hit tier 2B before we saw some a good winter snowpack and see that river fill back up a little bit more than and bring it back up to tier 1. Okay, do we want to talk real quickly? You want to ask, we got some questions before we move on to our in-state?
Yes, we do. All right. So Amir asked, how realistic was that 17.3 MAF? Was that an overestimation?
Yeah, so right now it's 12, anywhere from 12.5 to 13.5. So it was way over, but it wasn't wrong. They just had the technology. All they had was 20 years of data because that's all they had available to them in 1922. So it wasn't intentional. They just didn't have the information available to them that we have now.
Okay. Ian asks, was Mexico not invited to the negotiations or chose not to attend?
Well, we didn't invite them. No, they had to force the issue.
Okay. Barbara asks, how many dams are in the upper and lower basin of the Colorado River? Are they part of the allotment figures?
So in the lower basin, we have Meade, Mojave, and Havasu. And so there are 3 dams. But they call, and I think there's how many? 6 on the upper basin. We just looked at those cups. Those cups represented those reservoirs, which are the dams. Just the river dammed up and the valleys filled with water. There are 16 what they call projects. So a project is a dam. So a blockage in the dam or the river. And then a project is always those canals that were put in to take water out. So that was called a project. So there are 16 projects taking either blocking the dam. Some of them are dams and some of them are canals taking water out.
All right. And that's all the questions for now.
Okay. So we're going to zip through these really quickly here with 15 minutes. So in-state surface water on average is 12% across the state of Arizona. In Maricopa County, 39% of our water source is in-state surface water. So the map on the left is all of our watersheds. So a watershed, again, area of land where water drains from the high points to the low points and forms a water, usually a river. And so it shouldn't be surprising that the watersheds are named after the rivers that are at the bottom in the valleys. And we have the upper Colorado, the middle, or upper Gila, the middle Gila, and the lower Gila. We've got the San Pedro, we've got the Little Colorado, we've got the lower Colorado River from Lee's Ferry, we've got lower Colorado River from Boulder Lake, from Lake Mead. So each one of these is a watershed where water drains from the high points to the low points and forms a river. Currently, we have 2 of those watersheds that actually make it to the river. We have the Little Colorado flows into the Colorado and hits it at about Lee's Ferry. And then the Bill Williams flows out of northwestern Arizona and runs into the Colorado right at the bottom of Lake Havasu, right by Parker Dam, literally right by the uptakes for the Central Arizona Project Canal. We have dammed up and utilized the water in the other rivers in the state of Arizona, or we've overpumped the groundwater and the rivers have actually been pulled by gravity into the ground to fill up those spaces where we're pulling groundwater out of the ground, like the San Pedro River. It used to flow all the way to the Gila. It does not make it to the Gila anymore. And the Gila doesn't make it into not even the Gila River Indian community, because it's dammed up in Mexico and it's dammed up in the San Carlos Reservation in Arizona. And we have contained and dried up most of those rivers, are utilizing some of them. And we're utilizing the San Pedro, but just as groundwater because we're pulling it into the ground and pulling it out of our wells. These are some of the names of some of the rivers and some of their tributaries. So Salt River Project is a community-based not-for-profit. They actually provide water to more than 2 million people in the Phoenix metropolitan area, mostly the East Valley, and they have canals all the way to, again, the Olive Tree riverbed, but their delivery area does not go on the other side of the river. Very difficult to take canals across a riverbed. So their delivery area is like Chandler, Gilbert, Mesa, Tempe, Phoenix, Scottsdale. So it was formed in 1903, and they deliver water from the Salt and the Verde River watersheds, which those watersheds cover 8.3 million acres of land. A lot of it forested lands where we get a lot of snowpack. And they take that water for municipal use, agricultural, and industrial users within that service area. And that service area was set back in the early 1900s. That has not expanded because once they put their canals in, that was their delivery area. So they own and operate 4 reservoirs on the Salt, 2 on the Verde, and then they also own C.C. Cragen, which is up on East Clear Creek, north of Payson, and they supply Payson some of their drinking water from the C.C. Cragen. Used to be called the Blue Ridge Reservoir, and then they renamed it for one of their employees. The main function of these reservoirs is to serve as water storage for us down here in the valley. And they have a total storage capacity behind those 7 dams of 3,292,054 acre feet. So there's the Salt and Verde watersheds. The Salt actually, the Verde River starts up almost to Kingman. Water from Prescott flows in, and it flows all the way down and the Verde runs into the Salt out by Fountain Hills. The Salt actually starts, this is the White Mountains and Mount Baldy that has Sunrise Ski Resort on it. When that snow melts, that water is pulled down slope and forms the Salt. There's the Black and the White rivers, and they form the Salt River. It travels all the way down and meets the Verde, and Verde is actually considered a tributary of the Salt because the Salt is a longer river. They flow together, or used to, through Phoenix, and the Salt joined the Gila out by Phoenix International Raceway, out by PIR. The Agua Fria River runs in at around about a mile from there. So that area is right where the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant is. And water from, the only water in that river is at that point, because the wastewater from the wastewater plant is cleaned and put in the river at that point. So there is a wetlands there, there's a riparian area there, but it's reclaimed wastewater, which of course goes down in the ground and replenishes what doesn't evaporate or run off, goes into the ground to replenish groundwater. Bottom of a river doesn't have concrete on it, bottom of a lake doesn't have concrete, so we get some percolation from the bottoms of those, pretty high concentration, and then we also have evaporation. So we have 4 dams on the Salt: Roosevelt Dam, Horse Mesa Dam, which backs up Apache Lake, Mormon Flat Dam, which is Canyon Lake, and then Stewart Mountain Dam, which is Sorrel Lake. And then on the Verde, we've got Horseshoe Dam and Bartlett Dam. The Granite Reef Dam is actually a diversion dam. If you ever get a chance to go over there, it actually diverts. So that's where the river ends, the Salt River ends, because all of that water is diverted into 2 major canals that take it to the East Valley and west. And so the water that's in Tempe Town Lake, I believe, and most of that is groundwater that's pumped into Tempe Town Lake. So there's, I'm just gonna flip through these pictures. There's that's Roosevelt Dam, beautiful, beautiful dam. Apache Lake behind Horse Mesa Dam. Canyon Lake behind Mormon Flat Dam. If you ever get a chance, Canyon Lake has a fun ride called the Dolly Ride. They take you a tour of that lake, and that it's just a really steep canyon full of water, and you see bighorn sheep and eagle nests and bald eagle nests. It's a great, it's worth the trip out there to take that boat ride. Again, Sorrel Lake's behind Stewart Mountain Dam. So SRP, when they built their canal system, they already had kind of a hint of where they wanted to put their canals, because prehistoric Hohokam peoples had an irrigation, hundreds of miles of irrigation canals, all gravity fed, going out to the different communities within that nation in the valley. Hundreds of miles of canals that they irrigated their crops with. SRP followed more or less those canals, and that is the Salt River Project's current delivery area. So they break those, these are those 2 canals from Granite Reef Dam that takes water to the East Valley, and this takes it north and west. Now all of these have, these are called laterals, and then they have smaller canals coming off. This is the Alafria River, and it doesn't, the delivery area, those canals do not go past that river. So when I was telling you earlier, when that Goodyear built a canal or a pipe, and is bringing their allotment of Colorado River water to the town of Goodyear, they're actually putting a pipe in at the end of the canal system and then bringing that water out here to Goodyear, to their water treatment plant. I just thought these were interesting pictures. This is the canal many years ago, obviously, before cars, with horses and a carriage, horse-drawn carriage. And this is the canal. This was one of the major canals coming off of Granite Reef. No concrete, right? A lot of water loss there. This is a canal today, all concrete lined. Some beautiful artwork there. And then this is called the Canal Convergence. This is a celebration that they have in the Scottsville area on the canal there, and they float all kinds of light shows and float all kinds of interesting things on the water. And so if you get a chance to go out there, it's really pretty. So our 4th source of water is our effluent or reclaimed water, our wastewater that's been cleaned and then reclaimed and put out. A lot of it is used to irrigate landscaping in like parks and golf courses, the medians on our roads, Most of that water is reclaimed wastewater. There is a difference between a sanitary sewer system and storm drains. And I think there are some cities back east that actually combine the two, but, or at least they do with their, some of the farming operation, waste goes into their wastewater treatment plant. But here, our storm drains, all they do is take water from our streets when it rains, and it puts them into low areas, whether they be retention basins in your own community, which we put parks and grass and playground equipment. But most of those, when they're designing our communities, they have to put those low places in there to catch that water so it doesn't come in our back door. It goes into the lower places in our community, and then it goes from there into either a dry stream bed. Most of Phoenix is because we're in a valley and the Salt River runs in the bottom of the valley. There's an elevation change in the city, and our land slopes toward the river. And so our drainage, our stormwater drains, which are sometimes 10, 12 feet in diameter, run underneath our streets. And those little slots where the water goes from the road into that goes into those great big huge pipes, and they go all the way to the Salt River, and they dump into the Salt River. There's some pretty ugly, yucky places that you see along the river where those stormwater drains pick up and anything and everything that's on the ground, and it gets washed into the riverbed. This is the picture of an actual water treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant. That's sludge when it first gets there. So the basic function of a wastewater treatment plant is to speed up the natural process and purify it. We have the technical and technological capabilities of cleaning our wastewater to drinking water, potable quality. We just have to get past the yuck factor with most people, just the thought of doing that. But if you think about the water, the surface water, it travels across the surface. It picks up bird poop and bear poop and fish poop and, tree limbs and anything and everything on the surface. And it has to be cleaned also. But in Arizona, we do not have laws passed yet that enable us to utilize reclaimed wastewater into our potable water supply. Just kind of a basic wastewater treatment system that that you would see kind of the same process. Some of them use biotic living bugs. Some of them use different processes, but again, end result is usually a lot of our wastewater treatment plants come out like A++ quality. The only thing that they don't remove at most wastewater treatment plants are the pharmaceuticals. Everything that we put in our mouth and ingest that doesn't get used by our bodies gets flushed out of our bodies, and that goes to our wastewater treatment plants. So one of the major chemicals that they have to deal with that they found at the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant, what am I trying to think of? Not birth control, but the hormones that women take is flushed out and go to the wastewater treatment plant. Well, they didn't remove it, and they would put that water out into the Gila riverbed right there. And they were finding amphibians and reptiles with a lot of deformities. And so they realized what they were doing, and they went in partnership with ASU. They put a wetlands across the street from the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant, where they ran that water through this 4-quadrant wetlands that had wetland plants that actually uptook the pharmaceuticals and the heavy metals that they also don't remove from the water. And then it would go out a spillway and be about maybe 4 inches deep as it would go down the spillway when it left the wetlands before it got to the riverbed. And the UVs and the sunlight would actually remove the rest of the pharmaceuticals. And it was 98% clean by the time they got it down there. And so they eliminated that problem with the pharmaceuticals getting into the stream bed. Scottsdale, they recharge their aquifer. So again, remember they said they use 60-some% of their water is Colorado River water. Well, they put their CAP water and mix it with their groundwater or their recycled water, their reclaimed water. They mix that and then inject it into the ground. They call it Vados zone recharge wells. So it's like a regular well, but they just reverse it and it actually pushes the water, excuse me, into the ground. Which they then pump up with their groundwater wells. There's about 24 communities in the United States that are using some form of reclaimed water for drinking. It's gonna double and get larger. As in the West, especially the Southwest, as our water challenges get more and more. I can see Arizona finally passing a law to enable us to do that, as long as we can ensure that we've removed everything and that water's safe to drink and is potable. So, and this is I have 2 more slides. This is sustainable water management is the key here. There's things that we can be doing right now. Groundwater recharge, which is happening. The CAP water is replacing groundwater. We've been doing that since they completed the canal. And it's being pushed in the ground. We call that water banking. When we put water down in the ground, we're storing it and putting it in a savings account for us to use. Irrigation efficiency, agricultural industry, we're constantly increasing. I don't know if you guys have driven down the 303 where there's still quite a bit of agriculture. And almost every one of those farmers is using drip irrigation. So we're doing more and more efficient irrigation for agriculture in Maricopa County. Again, reclaimed water increased 4-fold. Almost every city, Avondale does recharge, Goodyear does recharge. Most of your cities are doing recharge. They may not be recharging directly above the area where they're pulling water from, but they're recharging it somewhere else. And our aquifers are all connected and moving very slowly down slope toward the ocean. And then rainwater harvesting, and it's always been popular for many years in Tucson. We're starting to see interest from cities. They want Project Wet to start delivering rainwater harvesting classes to students at the middle school and high school level, and actually helping them put in passive irrigation on the school campuses. So that's something we're in negotiations with especially the city of Phoenix is interested in that right now. So the city, we're all working together to try to maintain and have a sustainable water supply into the future, but it's going to take us all working together. And so my question is, why do we care? It's because all living things require water to live, and as our population increases and the need for water and food and energy increases, we all need to make wise decisions when we're managing our limited natural resource. So we all need to work together for a sustainable future. And how you can help Project Wet and work with us is we now are up to 31 water festivals that we put on across the state of Arizona. These are the ones that are left in the Maricopa County area that we have yet to deliver. And we train our volunteers. It is actually, the water festival is a learning unit. Teachers have to come to a workshop where we model activities that they are to do in the classroom before they bring their kids to the water festival, and then the activities that they do after in the classroom to embed that knowledge and deepen that knowledge gain. And so that water festival is kind of in the middle. And they do 4 activities at that water festival. One is on watersheds, one is groundwater, one is water cycle, and the other is water conservation and technology. They're half hour at each station. In 2 hours, they've rotated through 4 stations. They get back on the bus and we do another round. Some Gilbert, I think, is up to 2 days. So we do 1,800 fourth graders in Gilbert. We do 1,400 in Chandler over a 2-day period. We're busy across the state of Arizona delivering our water festivals to fourth graders. And we need volunteers. We have 2 volunteers at each one of those stations, and we have 16 stations going all at the same time. So it takes about 50, 60 people to actually put on a water festival. And there's only 4 of us that actually staff that actually are there, and everybody else is our volunteers. So we'd love for you to give us some of your 40 hours of volunteer time. If you want, again, I'm going to send this slide presentation out to you guys. And Lance Tubinathua, who is Hopi, is one of our water festival coordinators, and he's our volunteer coordinator. And you can reach out to him and let him know that you're interested. You'll meet him on Saturday, by the way. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
There were-
Pam, for so much incredible information.
Sorry, your head's gonna pop.
There were a couple more questions. Can we get to those?
Sure, if people don't mind staying on longer.
Okay, so Joette says, when a river runs underground like the Hassayampa, is it recharging an aquifer?
Gravity's always working. Gravity's pulling everything to the center of the earth. So even though it's not visible and it's traveling between those sand particles underground, some of that is still getting pulled down into the aquifer.
Okay. Colleen asks, what's keeping amphibians, birds, and other animals from being exposed to the contaminants in the constructed wetlands? It seems this would still be a problem.
I haven't seen any information about that. But by the time it gets out of that through that 4th quadrant, it's taken most of those heavy metals and the pharmaceuticals away. But I'm going to assume, they can't keep the animals and the birds and the amphibians out of that wetland. So I would assume at the beginning of that process in that 1st quadrant, they're probably getting some of those bad things.
Okay. And then Ian asks, what are the impediments to forcing what seems like an egregious use, especially in golf courses, to change their use or stop?
Money, I don't know, but at least a lot of the, I'm gonna reach out and say at least 50% of the golf courses that I know of across the valley use that reclaimed wastewater. So that wastewater is being pulled into the ground and recharging what doesn't evaporate. So and being taken, the plants don't mind, if there's heavy metals or pharmaceuticals in that water, the plants still survive, and that doesn't seem to bother them. So I don't know. We live in a society that's run by money and power, and so I don't know how we get past that. I wish I had the answer for that.
Okay. All right, and those are all the questions.
Okay, thank you all for having me.
Thank you again, Pam. If you would take your slideshow down.
Mhm.